Welcome to Roof to Curb, episode 5. I'm Todd Plifka, president of Custom One. If you're a foodie for the home, this is the pod for you. On Roof to Curb, we talk about everything in the home industry, including homes, renovation, landscaping, exteriors, and more. Roof to Curb is brought to you by Pull Tab Sports, the best podcast producer in the business. Today's guests, Kate Hamilton and Tony Sarenpa. Tony and Kate have combined over 40 years of experience in the real estate, and we're talking real estate today. Welcome, Kate and Tony. Thanks for coming on to Roof to Curb.
Thanks for having us.
So
thanks for having me.
We always go ladies first here, Tony. So we're going to introduce Kate and let her talk about her experience in real estate and how long you've been doing, and how about just overall in the industry. You got a lot of different roles you fit and have performed in the industry to give you a lot of knowledge and well-roundedness. So Kate Hamilton, introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. I've been in the building industry for 26 years. The lion's share of that time has been spent with a builder association, a couple different industry companies and whatnot. Real estate wise, moved into that sector, that division, about 5 years ago. So passion for new construction, passion for helping people, understanding processes in that, and found my way to Custom One Homes, which has been just a treat. So really, I've dedicated my side of the real estate world to new construction, specifically working a little bit with existing homes, but more or less just the new construction side. Great.
Yeah, and you've done some backup sales, we call it, right?
Yep.
Where maybe a client comes into Custom One Homes and decides to build with us, and then you help support them on the sale of their current home.
Correct. Yeah, it really makes sense to package it all together from a timeline perspective, understanding when they're going to move in, and the timeline for the new construction, and then be able to sell their existing home.
Great. Tony Sarenpa, how are you doing today?
Doing great.
Great. Who is Tony Sarenpa?
Started in real estate in 2001 with a rental, so I approached it from an investor perspective. Started with that. I was a sophomore or junior in college at the time. Owned and operated that while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Spent a number of years just thinking about flipping property and making offers on property. Started that in 2003. Never bought anything. Couldn't make the numbers work. And then continued to think about rentals and why real estate? Like, why was it drawing me so? Why was there such this strong pull to it? And so I thought more and more about rentals. Then in 2006, got licensed, made the decision in 2005, got in, wanted to buy property, and realized I needed a job and income and all these other things that go along with that. So started selling homes, and I kind of fell into it because of that. But my real passion starting was in the investment side, and then bought 3 properties right away my first year that I was in, that I was a licensee. And then, and struggled a little bit with the sales initially, and then really started to figure it out and grew a team, had a team of 10, been in a lot of different, different situations over the years with growing our team. Had as many as 10.
You had a team of 10 pre-recession.
Yeah, roughly 10. No,
frame.
we grew that during the recession.
Okay.
So started in 06, started growing through, figured out the business myself through 2008, 9, really started to understand it, and then added team members. Started teaching other people how to sell real estate, brought them on my team. I started doing exclusively listing side for 5 or 6 years. Realized I got a little disconnected from the industry if I did that. So I went back to doing buy side and sell side, and then I felt like I really had a pulse on the market, knowing really everything that was going on. Like, what are the trends? What's current? And it's amazing how fast that changes. We're seeing it right now again with inspections coming back. Thankfully, buyers get to have some comfort doing that, and sellers are like, "Oh gosh, I don't know about this." And then in 2016, 17, I started buying a ton of rentals, and that was a huge part of my focus. So I still spent about 90% of my time helping people buy and sell, and then would do these. Purchased this home from grandpa and grandma that owned it for 30 years, dated but in good condition, great neighborhoods, and really created a niche for that that focus was really about providing an opportunity for the people that we had that wanted to build a home or wanted to move. So we wanted to have inventory that was in neighborhoods where we work really heavily already with helping people buy and sell. So it's really a comfortable temporary move for a year or 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's great. And today you're with Keller Williams, right?
Yeah.
And you focus mostly on the west side of town.
Yeah.
Right. You live over on the west side.
Yeah. Office is at Ridgedale.
Yeah.
Here on that north side. And then we were in Wayzata for the first 15 years and then moved to a new space, but all centered around the western suburbs. So from Eden Prairie to North Plymouth and Maple Grove and then out to Mound and Delano and Corcoran and but we really focus almost all of our sales, Minnetonka, Orono, Wayzata, South Plymouth.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we've got
4 focal cities.
Tony, who does a ton of work on the west side. Kate does some work on the east side. Represents Custom One. Tony represents Custom One on the west side. And you guys get to see a lot of things, right? So a lot of transactions, a lot of different things. There's some consumer confidence concerns in the market right now. Interest rates have doubled over the last 15 months, 16 months, maybe a little longer than that, I guess, 17 months. But maybe just talk about, why would I buy now? Is it the time to buy? Is it the time to sell? I'm concerned. I don't know where the market's going. I don't know where interest rates are going. So let's talk about, what are the interest rates going to do? Where are they now? You hear the line of don't marry the interest rate, marry the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of concept. So Kate, maybe start us off with, should I buy or sell?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Do it.
Do all of it.
I mean, I guess like for Tony and I or anyone, right? If we had the crystal ball, we'd really be magicians and really have all the answers. And we don't, but we know enough to recognize that rates go up and down. We've obviously been on a roller coaster for the last probably 2 years of everything. And a lot of things dictate why people move. Obviously, life changes, job changes, a lot of stuff where you have to move, but wanting to move is a little different. People get nervous about the rate. We hear that all the time. But then you also can think about when the rate drops and what that does to buyers. It really brings them out. So from a competitive set, now is a great time, right? Look at a house. If you love it, yes, rates might be a little higher. You can refinance. There's a lot of different programs that lenders offer. Certainly talk to a lender about those types of programs, but it's a good time to buy. It's a good time to get out there. It's also a nice time to list. We're actually creeping up on that window. I just had this conversation this week is like, you got until October-ish and then it slows down. It's the holidays. Yeah, the seasonality of it. Like right now people are getting into schools, settling back down to get into school district driven, season driven. But then October hits-ish. I mean, Tony, you agree, probably that seasonality. And then holidays happen. And then we always subscribe to right after the Super Bowl, go crazy. Mm-hmm. Well, that time is where rates might start to drop. So like get in, get out, do your thing. I'd say go now. Certainly work with a licensed agent who can represent you well and talk to mortgage lenders. But I mean, it's absolutely a great time to do either.
Sure. Tony, what's your opinion on it? You buying or selling? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so really great question. And I think there's really no answer for me. The answer is for the consumer. They're the one who's giving this perspective of, is it the right time to do this for us or not? And I always go back to saying, people will move for all these different reasons. They'll move because they've got changes in family, they've got changes in job, they've got all these different factors that are going on. And regardless of rates, regardless of inventory, there's going to be a segment of the population that has to move this year. Mm-hmm. And knowing, when is the right time to do that's almost more of an investor kind of geared question in that
mindset.
Way. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, look, if I've got, second kid on the way, third kid on the way, and I've got a 2-bedroom house, we're moving this year. Right. And it's either go to rent something that has the right size or go to buy something that has really the things they need in the school district they need.
And we've been seeing it on both sides, right? So as families progress and grow, they need more space. When kids graduate, move on. They're more, adults now and having kids and
family that has that 6,000, 7,000 square foot house that they just had their third kid graduate, and it's time to
That house
to
gets-
downsize.
Yeah.
That house gets big
Yeah,
real quick.
two people in that size of house is a lot.
Right. So we're seeing it on all market fronts. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about interest rates versus inventory? So Kate, Tony, both have communicated like you got to do what you got to do, right? And you see it where inventories still have not progressed. They're progressing a little bit more in the last 6 months, but inventories are still fairly low. And as a Twin Cities market, we're underbuilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So election year comes. Now we got interest rates dropping. Inventories haven't really increased. So the luxury of the client today is that they can do inspections. They can put contingencies. They can
Yep.
take their time. 12 months from now, do you think they're going to be afforded that opportunity?
Much more competitive
Yeah.
market.
So,
Yeah.
so maybe just talk about how does interest rate impact inventory and how does inventory impact the buying opportunities, those kind of things. So, Kate?
I mean, that's always the question, right? Like, what's going to happen and how is that going to impact it? And I alluded to that before, like rates are going to drop, competitive set's going to come in, inventory is low. We obviously dabble in a much higher price point market, but even the lower side of things. I mean, I had a 25-year-old recently try to buy a first time house and they're over 300,000, you know? So it's like, and that's no inspection, get in as fast as you can, and hopefully it works out kind of situation.
Right.
And I'm representing her and can't really advise her on doing that, especially, as an agent and then your own kid. But I mean, you've got that side of things too. And obviously, my business is much more focused on custom one, a luxury product and higher end, but there's still this huge gap in affordability and how rates play into that. And things change. I just think we saw it in 21, like gangbusters on 2% rates and what people did. And some of probably not very good decisions were made on
Or
a buy side.
You overpay a little bit or
Right.
yeah, whatever.
So, I mean, gosh, we've all been around and saw it in 2008, where it's like different set of circumstances, but still like people made decisions emotionally that probably didn't pan out very well. So
there's definitely more urgency in the decision-making process, right?
Yep.
And that creates some decisions that maybe you don't want to do.
Right. And talk about, I mean, why work with an agent and an experienced one who knows how to represent you and how to formulate a deal that is in your best interest and less driven maybe emotionally and much more of a strategic approach.
No, for sure. Tony, what do you think?
Yeah. So
Interest rates, inventory.
So interest rates, inventory. I think
Where's this thing going?
something I want to go back to is for a long time, when we talk about inventory levels in a balanced market, buyer's market or seller's market, we always use this measure of about 6 months worth of inventory was a balanced market. You get to 7, 8 months, 9 months. There was a time when we were in that last recession in 06 to 2011 where we had 3 years worth of inventory in the $1 million+ market. 3 years of inventory. It was crazy how few homes were selling, in that price point. And then we saw, in some cases we saw as much as 12 to 18 months worth of inventory in some of the more entry level stuff. But even that's fairly high. And now today we see market time go from 1 or 2 days to 2 or 3 weeks. And all of a sudden, the message in the market from, what buyers think, they're like, oh, well, gosh, the market's going to crash.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like 1 or 2 weeks inventory or 1 or 2 weeks worth of market time doesn't equate to a falling market. But we actually have seen the average price per home in our area for the first time in 13 years dropped by about $1,000. Not a lot, but it's the very first time in 13 years that it's actually declined slightly. We've just seen this real slow, steady, nice straight curve. And so I don't know if that scale is going to change, whether 6 months might not be the measure anymore. Maybe 2 or 3 months is the measure of a balanced market between buyer and seller, because we're starting to approach 2 months worth of inventory in some price point segments. So I don't know. Is that scale changing?
I think it is changing.
Get to 3 months? Are we going to get to 4 months?
I think to your point,
I don't know.
That measurement has changed significantly, and it used to be somewhat methodical, to your point, and it used to be like 3 month, 6 month, 12-month windows of like, oh, the year of 2024 in real estate is going to be X. I don't think it operates that way. In fact, Kate, you talked about seasonality. I think the markets operate in these sprints, right? Like 2 to 4 week sprints almost.
Yep.
and where you're like, all right, April was like this, August was like this, December's like this. And I just think that scale is greatly reduced. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So if I go back over the last 3 or 4 years, it's exactly that. There's the market of the season, or there's the market of the month that's happening, this general trend. And it's almost like the market, it's almost like they're all connected. All the buyers are connected. All the sellers are connected. They're by some unknown messaging system.
Oh boy, conspiracy theory.
I don't know what it is.
It's some app,
but
sure.
But all of a sudden, like no one responds, or no one is doing anything, and it's not necessarily tied to some sort of an event. Like we always look at the first couple of weeks in July. If I look back over my career in the last almost 17 years, and I say, okay, well, that first week of July through about the middle,
Vacation time.
It's just quiet. It's time for vacation because everyone's gone. Everyone in Minnesota realizes this season is so short for the nice summer months. And this year was very different. July was the biggest month I've ever had in my career.
Yeah.
And I would have never expected that.
I even think this year, you look at January, February versus April, May.
Mm-hmm.
They felt very different. Right. And typically the Super Bowl conversation of, when do I want to get my house on the market after the Super Bowl? That's when market starts. People used to say, spring break. Now that date keeps moving back, but it's like trying to get you more runway in the spring because by July, everyone's on vacation.
Yeah. Well, let's have a really real conversation about that for a minute, because we talk about seasonality in Minnesota and we talk about how, like, when is the right time to list your house? Well, if we talk about it from a seller's perspective, the right time to list your house is March through June, okay, in any typical year. But if you talk about it from a buyer perspective, they want to get going in January. Yeah. Like as soon as inventory starts rolling, they want to get on the train and they want to get moved in.
They want the opportunity.
And those sellers that list January 2nd or January 3rd, they usually do really, really well because there's almost no inventory at that time. It's much quieter. So if you're wanting to, the interesting thing is depending on what perspective you have, the right time to list is really when you're ready, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people say, well, I want the outside, I want the grass green, and I want the trees.
You take those pictures in the fall.
Whatever. Yeah. Like you can take those the season before in a lot of cases, but it's interesting when you talk about those details.
Yeah.
Because there's always an opportunity.
The Twin Cities market is still underbuilt by 60 to 70,000 homes. And we're still average new construction price on a house is in the 500,000 mark, which are, record levels. So Tony, you talked about the inventory number, of like when's the right time and those kind of things. And that's decreased to $1,000. But overall, that number is still progressively increased, right? Because now as the housing stock comes in, it's more expensive. And then now all the houses on the market, the entry level, so you can't find a house at 300,000 or it's really competitive. Well, that number used to be 250 and 220, and
for sure,
so it's all progressing, right? And then we get into this affordability conversation. So it's interesting, and we don't have to go down that path today, but it's everything's getting more expensive. And my concern, if I was a betting man, someone said, hey, what's a year, 2 years going to be like? I would say, hey, interest rates are going to come down. Election year's coming up. I'd also say that the average price is going to increase, right? So like now is the time to buy. And back to that, marry the house, don't marry the rate. My concern is, will inventory and supply chain be able to keep up when interest rates go down? Not trying to create a doomsday thought, but we've got some interesting things going on in the market. And if you looked out that year, 12 months, 24 months, it could be interesting. So hot markets, Kate, where are houses moving? Where's the place to buy?
Yeah. I mean, I focus a lot of my business, like you said, on the east side. So I'm always kind of looking at that area. Woodbury permits are still up. That's been a really hot market for permits being pulled. Lakeville, we've got a nice development down in the Prior Lakeville area, and that's really been popular. I think I also look at that a lot. So kind of the pulse is on that. What's interesting too is I was actually just having this conversation with a potential buyer, and like they'll go anywhere because they'll work remotely. So
Sure.
like
Before it used to not be like that, right?
where it used to we used to look at job data, where are jobs, where it's coming in, and now like people are like, well, I'll go wherever.
Yeah.
Just have to have a dedicated
Yeah,
office,
the
right?
person that's buying the house in Prior Lake works for a company that's
Yeah.
based out in New York.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I
it
just
doesn't matter anymore.
texted someone this morning and like their ideal was Shakopee, but then they're like, well, go anywhere. Like,
Sure.
do I want to be there? Sure. But can I go wherever? Yeah. So like, that's interesting. I know Tony will have a pulse on more of the West side. So that's really a lot of, like you said, where your focus is, which I think from statistical data on MLS and everything, that's really where things are moving the most on the West side versus East. But
Yeah. Hot market, Tony. Where are you buying? Plymouth?
Lots of
Why's that?
activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
know you're going to say Orono, but
yeah, Orno for sure. Yeah. It's really interesting. I want to say the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen a lot of change. Like all of a sudden, we've got a little bit of inventory in Orno below $1 million. And historically, we've almost, for the last 5 or 6 years, we haven't had almost anything. It's been really minimal, 1 or 2 that come on and then they all sell immediately. And now, you're starting to see a few build up, just a couple that are here and there that are lasting for 2 or 3 weeks. A couple of price reductions that are starting to happen. But you look at Wayzata, you can almost not get into Wayzata for less than $1.5 million.
Sure.
It's a difficult market. 2.5 is more reasonable. 3 million is more reasonable. You can start to find quite a bit.
yeah.
And that's crazy.
Some-
Those numbers are
and those
just
are
astronomical.
2 of the, arguably the most wealthiest zip codes in the state, right? So it's interesting to watch, $1 million becomes a teardown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Out of
under.
necessity.
Yeah, out of necessity.
Right.
So and you're not getting lakefront with that either.
No.
But,
No.
why do I need a realtor? Where's the realtor business going? And you start seeing different brokerages open up and referrals and all these kind of pyramid schemes almost, but direct marketing. But why do I need a realtor, Kate? Why can't I just do it myself? I see the house, I like it. Why can't I just buy it and save the commission? I don't have to deal with a realtor.
Yeah, there's a lot of logistics that go into buying a house. There's a lot of legalese that go into it. So having an agent represent you, being able to negotiate, being able to, like I said, kind of take that emotional side out and give you much more of a black and white, realistic data, get you into a home. A lot of times you can't get into a home if you're just a buyer without an agent. The way lock boxes are set up, the way security is, it's just smart. I mean, it would be like, let's say going through a divorce without an attorney, right? Like you can do it. I don't know that you want to. It probably depends on the relationship, but it's just a smart decision to make. There's obviously commission involved, but we're real estate agents who are running a business as well. But a lot of those can be talked through and discussed as well. But just to me, it's just a no-brainer that you would use someone who's educated, licensed, that can take you through the process.
Yeah, I mean, if you break your arm, you can diagnose it on Google too, right?
Yeah,
So-
WebMD is perfect until it's not.
Until it's not.
Yeah.
But Tony, why do I need a realtor?
Yeah, I would dive a little deeper into that question. I would just assume that they're going to use a realtor because that's the smart thing to do. So thank you for answering that, Kate. But what I would dive into is I would say, well, not just an agent. You want an agent that's unbelievably experienced. Because I think for the first time in almost a decade, we've seen the population of licensees decrease in like busloads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aggressively.
We will probably see a 25 to 30% decline in the very short term when we see renewals come through next year. I'll be very curious to see where those are at, but it is a mass exodus.
Yeah.
Do you have any
people getting out?
Analytical number to that, Tony? I mean, is real estate licenses, are they down 20%, 50%? Any idea?
I think it's more than 20%.
Okay.
And if you took, so let's just say over the last a few years ago, let's just say that the average licensee, if you took all licensees, everyone who's licensed, you'd say, okay, the average licensee sells about 7 homes a year. So, okay, well, what does that equate to? So when you look at that from a wage perspective, what is someone making that's in that category, if they're average, right? They're not going to be that skilled. So if you look across industries, the best of the best are going to be They're going to be highly skilled. They're going to run into so many different opportunities and so many different situations that they know how to navigate the challenging ones. Like, I mean, some of the things I've seen that have come up over the years, I saw, I mean, things that you see that you'd never expect, you know, like
Tony almost wanted to go into detail.
I almost want to dive into the detail, and I'm going to hold myself back.
He's protecting all parties.
Yeah,
It's a smart decision.
You have to, right? I mean, it's just incredible what you can navigate through. But if you've got someone who's experienced that sells, you know, let's just say they sell 100 homes a year, they sell 150 homes a year, the amount of experience and the amount of education that you have in that kind of spot, even 25 to 30 or 50 homes a year, it's still a lot of experience, but there's some sort of a balance between, you know, how much can one person handle and then what is that level of service. So I think there's a lot of different facets to that segment or that question. You know what?
Yeah.
Well, even like, I mean, I said it from the get-go, like I specialize in new construction. That's kind of my area. So like I may not have the numbers from a volume perspective, right? Where it's like, or the unit perspective, but I do on the volume side. Cause it's like, but that's also, there's not a lot of agents who do new construction. Some think they can, but it's, you know, it's very different. Like and I would argue it's hard to do both existing and new construction if you're dedicated to being a model and your hours are different and everything
and that experience level when you're in the middle of a negotiation, if you have someone who's got an unbelievable level of experience and they've navigated all these other situations prior, and they can answer and solve that thing, whatever that obstacle is that comes up, the time on which it is resolved in is a lot of time going to dictate whether that deal's going to stay together or go away.
For sure.
I had a negotiation earlier this year that lasted for about 60 days. One party was participating and the other one wasn't, and then now the one who wasn't participating is participating, and the other one's asleep. You know, and not responding. Like, okay, well, let's try and get this thing back on life support and get it going again. Life happens, you know, like everybody's in a different situation, and there's so many things that come up, like just the dynamic of where they're going to move to, and what are the kids going to do, or how do the kids emotionally respond to the move? And how do both spouses respond to the move? And so there's all these emotional dynamics that are going on behind the scenes. Right? It's like figuring that out and navigating through that. It's like when you dive into it, you understand, okay, well, this is why it took so long, but you can't go explain that to the buyer.
Right.
You know, well, seller took this long to figure out their situation, but now that they got it, now they're on board and now they're full steam ahead. Well, that negotiation died long ago.
Yeah.
You know, and that couldn't come back together, but it would have been perfect.
Right.
It may have been the best buyer they'd ever find, but
yeah, it's interesting to watch.
You know, now we go and resell it, and the market's just a little different than it was 90 days ago.
Yeah, no, it'll be different 90 days from now, right?
For sure.
Roof to Curb is sponsored by Will Anderson Insurance. I want you to try a quick exercise for me. Think of your insurance person. Okay, can you picture them? It's probably some person from high school or the old neighborhood that you no longer keep in touch with. Insurance is too important for the status quo. Isn't it time you switch to one of the best? Will Anderson can help you with all of your home, auto, and commercial insurance needs. He'll give you a fair solution. He'll be there to pick up the phone when you need him most, and he'll explain a complicated business like he's reading a children's book. Reach out to Will Anderson, and we bet you he'll save money too. Call or text Will for a quote at 612-361-7283 or visit willandersonagency.com. Let's talk a little bit about defining, you know, some of these website companies, the Redfin, the Zillows of, you know, I go on Zillow and I can see all the data I want, and it's got to be telling me something, right? So I go on Zillow and I see what the house is worth, and that's what I should market it at. And, you know, does that really devalue the real estate community, or does it actually help improve it? So, you know, what are some of those websites, and are they truly actual, or how do they get their numbers, or, you know, they can't possibly adjust in 20 days and 30 days and 90 days, can they?
I think generally speaking, the consumer is more educated than they've ever been.
For sure.
And as a realtor in this process, we have to be that much more educated in the process than the consumer. Like, this isn't just about pricing. Like, we don't, from from what we add to the conversation when we're helping someone buy or sell, it's not always just about price. Like that's actually become a little bit smaller piece of the job because the consumer is so well educated. If they know how to look at a home and compare and contrast its features and benefits that are specific to those, well, a lot of times they do need an education of, okay, well, how much value is put on the lot? Like, okay, well, that one was a lookout lot. It had a pond view. It had this, beautiful view out the back. But then this other one had a lot that was 3 times the size. Well, it was still less money because it didn't have what people wanted. People wanted the view.
Yeah,
even though it was a smaller lot. So
the lot in central Minnesota is not the same value as the lake lot in Minnetonka. It's a little different.
Or 2 lake lots on Minnetonka directly next door to each other. You got one with lakeshore that's a little bit mucky, or it's got reeds, and there's no view down the main
south facing, north facing
main bay. I mean, that's a very different value. But how do you quantify that? Right. How do you say, well, that's a $100,000 difference, or that's a $50,000 difference?
I don't see that on Zillow is my point.
Zillow doesn't show that.
Yeah.
No, but I think to your point, Todd, too, like there is a benefit in it. Like it gets people to you, right? Well, I saw it here. They're going to explore it. I don't think a ton of people put 100% stock in those websites. I think that they are their information.
It's a tool.
Yeah. It's a tool.
It's a good baseline.
It's not a problem. I think when some of those like other groups came in a couple of years ago, it made agents nervous. Like, oh gosh, they're going to come in, they call. But in my experience, and Tony can speak to it too, like I think people like the relationship, like a dedicated person who's really there to guide you through it, and less of a robot, right? Or less of just a interaction so like the personal touch on having a person that's not in part of those programs. I also don't chase like the Zillow lead. So,
sure.
I mean, to me, that's not a benefit to what I do as an agent.
Yeah. How do you define quality in that conversation, right? So Tony, you talked about location, but there's also this quality of finish, fit and finish. And when people pull data, and Kate, you brought some data with, and you look at dollars per square foot of what a house costs on address 123 Oak Street versus 123 Smith Street. It's a house, right? It's got 4 walls and a roof. It's got to be the same. So why are they different in price points?
Yeah.
Dollars per square foot. What makes them different?
Right. The dollar per square foot question is probably the bane of my existence. It's like, why don't we get into the home first before we talk dollar per square foot? Because oftentimes you get them into a home that's a quality built, custom product, and it just speaks for itself. I a lot of times will tell consumers like I can get all geeky and how the house goes up and what type of product is their science. Yeah, right. Yeah. Because it does set you apart. It really does. But I've learned over the years that leading with price isn't the best way to lead. Really leading with getting in and feeling a product and hearing it or not hearing it, right? Solid core doors, poplar millwork. Like you can go into all of that. And I do think that there's a large part of the buyer that really does buy on quality and not on price. You just have to get there and educate someone and have the opportunity to do so. But there's also obviously some buyers who will buy for a price point and then maybe have some regret.
Sure. Buying
there's a lot of balance between the two. Like for sure. Are we talking about someone who's an entry level new construction buyer? They're going to gravitate towards some of the national builders that are using inexpensive materials, but the trend we've seen,
square footage.
Right. They need a certain size. Yep. They don't want to do a renovation. People are less and less handy these days. So buying a house that's a little bit of a fixer is a tougher category, and it's so expensive to remodel.
It is. Yeah.
Good thing Custom One has a renovation division.
Custom One renovation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that there's so many different levels that'll blend between. I had a neighbor of mine that just built with a bigger box builder, and they can do it a little bit cheaper than Custom One can. And overall, like it's a nice home. But you go in that home and you go in a Custom One home, and you feel the difference and you see the difference in quality. And then we start diving into what are the materials that are used. How long is it going to last? Well, a Custom One house, the way that we build with a lot of the things you're going to have 10 to 15 years, 20 years worth of, maintenance free.
Yeah.
There really will be nothing in a lot of those cases. You're going to have some of the appliances and that stuff. But for the most part, you're not going to have siding. You're not going to have windows as an issue. Your roof's not going to be an issue. everything's really well buttoned up. But on a lot of these other ones, some of these windows start to fail after 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
They don't have a 20-year warranty on the glass.
Yeah, and if you are buying a product that has, more of a vinyl window in it, versus maybe a Firex or an Ultrex or, some of those kind of products, right, from Anderson and Marvin, but it's sufficing that buy, to your point earlier, Tony, is I can't afford that at this point, right?
It's tough.
Yeah.
So it's
Everything
tough.
is so expensive.
And when we talked about earlier about, the entry level price has gone up, and then you compound it with interest rate, my means are my means.
Right.
But I have needs. So I do that transaction. It gets me into the market so that as it progresses and hopefully I gain equity and I pay down the mortgage and all those fun things now, and I make more income as time progresses, and I go from my 20s to my 30s to my 40s, or 30s to 40s, whatever the time frame is. Now I can buy a house that has more substantial quality, that has lifestyle more attached to it, and now I'm proud of it, and I can have social activities and my kids, and I feel really good about it. So it's interesting, but we need people to be able to get into those entry level homes and own, so that they can progress through the buying cycle and the progression of houses, right? So my needs when I have 1 kid versus 2 kids versus 5, or whatever the number is, it's different, right? And locations change based on school systems and jobs, and the whole ecosystem is so interesting to watch. But yeah. So cool. Custom built versus production houses. We talked a little bit about that. What are you guys seeing in development? Like, what I'm seeing is, there's no more 100-foot wide lots, right? Not coming out in new developments, whether it be in Plymouth around Wayzata High School, or Woodbury around Eastridge or Woodbury High School. They're very different, and you started seeing them go from 100-foot wide lots to 80s to 70s to 60s to 50s, right?
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? Why does that happen? And what is going to be the trend moving forward? Are we going to go back to 100-foot wide lots?
I mean, that's what the consumer wants, right? Like, a lot of our calls are for more acreage, and I think we have this balance of consumers wanting like an acre. Like, I love that, having some room. I want to be a part of a community, but I don't want to reach out and touch my neighbor. And it's funny how you're like, well, that's what the consumer wants, but that's not what they're getting, right?
No.
So, I mean, that's a constant call, because we, Custom One, we're in several developments. Some are smaller lots, some are bigger lots, and it's like, what is the what's the Goldilocks, right? It's too big, too small. Some of it's dictated obviously on just the family dynamic in itself, but they're much smaller lots. Like, build them in, squeeze them in there. And I don't know, at least not from the calls I'm getting, people don't want that right now. Like, people want a little bit more space. You're working from home. You're, wanting to build out a backyard area that you can cook in and
more
play
facilities.
in, and entertain. And same with pools, right? Like, people want their own pool. They don't want to be a part of a community pool, is what I'm hearing more. And so it's interesting dynamic right now of like, I want a little bit more space. I still want to be in a community, but I don't want to literally cross over 5 feet and touch my neighbor.
Yeah, we were in a conversation yesterday. A great client that is working with Custom One, and the conversation was, I've been moving around and I've been on the road most of my life. I want this place to be
your
X,
retreat,
right?
Yeah.
The retreat where I don't have to leave to the point where they're actually, from farm to table type activity.
For sure.
Let alone facilities of, sport courts and pools and all these other things. But it's really interesting to watch. So, Tony, what do you think development wise, lot size? I mean, you watched that area around Wayzata High School was crazy. I mean, as far as the growth cycle of that and how big a space it was and how many homes came in around that area, it was interesting to watch.
It was all farm fields.
Yeah.
When I grew up in that area,
Right.
I grew up in South Plymouth, and our average lot size was a half acre. And I don't know exactly width, but some of those widths were 150 feet wide, 170 feet wide,
Yeah.
Or 0.6 of an acre, and it's all dry, and that's unheard of now in Plymouth. In Plymouth, it's now 0.25, 0.22. I'm seeing some really small, very, very efficient lots, and they're well put together, but when you walk in between the two homes, when you're showing homes that are just a couple of years old or new, you can almost reach your arms out and touch both
Yeah,
of
you see
them. It's
these-
a little,
Yeah.
it's a
5
little
and
tight.
5 or 5 and 10 setbacks.
I have seen some settings really, really well put together though, where they make the backyard still very private, even though they're tighter on the sides. There's just not many windows on the sides,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of offsets a little bit of that feeling of privacy that's there. But as a general trend, I don't see Plymouth or I don't see a city like that going back, or they're not going to go make larger lots all of a sudden, because there's such pressure on pricing still, and that's never going to go away.
Yeah. So if you're the consumer, you can go on to, municipalities, whether you're in Plymouth or Woodbury or Lakeville. You can go on the municipalities and look at their comp plan, right? And it'll show you all their development. You can kind of see what's coming, and you can be like, all right, I'm kind of crystal balling this thing, and I'm looking at like, there's no 70-foot wide lots coming. They're all 50s and 60s or whatever they are, and however long they're improved. So it's interesting to watch. What about these rental communities? I've seen these rental communities pop up in the last 5 years. Is that the trend? Is that our cities going to become full rental communities?
It's a great question. I'm seeing a few of them pop up. I don't know long term as they all start to fill up. I've seen a number of them around that are being built that are single family homes or townhomes or twin homes. And a lot of them are still under construction right now. And to see what that trend looks like, do they all fill up? Do they have to start getting to a point where they have to start selling some of them because they won't all rent and they don't all fill up? I don't know. That's a real different trend.
We just had one go in Roseville where I live, and it was this little plot of land, and we kind of watched it like what's going to happen, and we saw it go for sale. No signage, and it's 6 basically row homes, all attached, back end garages, no lot, all leased. They're advertised for like a business executive who's coming in and going and doesn't have to maintain. And this specific builder, that's all he does.
Well,
But like Roseville hasn't seen it. So for our community, it was interesting to see it come in and like, but they're all sold or they're all leased, done. Like,
you see, obviously there's apartments and there's townhome rental projects, and there's, I think the bigger trend though is back to that single family side of a large community of 40, 80, 120 houses. They're all rentals. And, Tony, you've dabbled quite a bit on the investor side. It's interesting to watch of, these guys come in, bigger companies and venture capitalists and equity-based companies, but they come and build out a development, put it up for sale or for lease, and then, they do a 7-year plan on it. So in 7 years, they're selling their stock. So it goes from a rental to an own.
Right.
But
yeah, I think that the basic human need is still pretty similar. People want the environment that they want. They want a community. They want, they want a great place to live. And whether a rental community offers that, I think it's going to be a little bit more. You're going to have a little bit more transition between families coming and going. So there'll be, generally speaking, there's going to be less community in that, in my view. For sure. Long term, I think that'll be a tougher thing. And people, like, if I look at all the moving factors of why people move, like, well, we don't have connections here, so we're kind of free to go wherever. Or if they're very, very rooted in the community, and like there are certain neighborhoods that have an event every 2 months.
Sure.
Where they're getting together at someone's house, or they're getting together at a brewery, or they're doing some kind of a community event.
Very social activity.
Not that everyone does that, but in some of those neighborhoods, there's very, very low turnover.
Yeah.
Very low turnover. So if you look at that basic human need of what people want, if there's connection there, they're going to stay. And if there isn't, you're going to have a lot of turnover. So I don't know, long term, it's hard to say. I think there's a place for it.
Yeah, I think there's
for sure.
We haven't talked about school systems very much, but Woodbury's got a good public school system, but it also feeds more than 11 private schools, right? So it's interesting to watch in communities. You see it in Orono, you see it in Wayzata, you see it where public school systems are strong and people are attracted to those school systems, and you see a school get built and then all these homes come around it. And then people are satisfied or dissatisfied with the public school system. And then they have this private school. Well, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, how many private schools were around versus today?
Right. And those private schools were very community-based too, where you weren't driving an hour to go to them.
No. And now you see, people that live in Woodbury that go out to a place like Holy Family or to Holy Angels and to Tino Grace. But now you got people that live in New Brighton that go to Hill Murray, or, people that live in Bloomington that go out to, where do they go in Orono, Tony?
Well, Orono, you've got a lot of different
Right.
private schools. You got Providence, you got
Ton of them.
Benilde, you got
So
there's
Yeah.
a lot of different ones, and people will drive 20 to 30
Yeah.
minutes.
yeah, so it's interesting how the whole education school system in my mind has changed quite a bit as well, where you had to live within 2 miles or 5 miles of that
Yeah.
school. I got to be within busing or I got to be within walking, and now that just it's
But there's a whole
opened up so
change of
much.
that with like people working from home and the ability
Yeah.
to drive. Obviously,
I can bring my
pandemic
kids.
and
It doesn't matter if that's
Yeah.
the right school for my family and fit. I'm willing
I
to
make it
drive the
work.
20, 30
Yep.
minutes, right? Because I work remote and I'm able to do it.
Yeah.
So it's but it has changed the housing decision as well. So
Yep.
now the client that does say, "Hey, I think I want to be in Shakopee,"
Yeah.
Prior Lake's okay. Lakeville could be okay, or Bloomington or Eden Prairie. Like
Yeah.
it's 10, 15 minutes to Shakopee, right? Roof to Curb podcast sponsored by Duke Cannon. Don't trust your mutton chops and mustaches to just any brand. Duke Cannon Supply Company makes hardworking grooming products for hardworking guys, and their products will help you keep your facial hair in championship form. From their beard wash and balms to beard oil, they have your back and your face covered. Duke Cannon. Work harder. Smell better. Stock up on DukeCannon.com and use Beard10 for 10% off your next order. Duke Cannon is an official partner of the Minnesota Wild. What are you guys seeing just in housing stock and homes of what is the consumer attracted to, or what should they look for maybe in the purchase of a home as well? Like, how do I know it's dated or not dated? What are the trends that keep it from making it a good buy, if you will, good
Yeah.
value?
I think one of the most interesting recent trends I think we'll see more in 24 is the way the house is laid out, right? So when you talk about older homes and you're like, oh, small spaces, it's not an open floor plan, it must be a early 2090 build. I actually think we're going back to that. And I've been reading some interior design blogs and different things where it's like people are actually going back, or a different way to go look at it, of less of an open floor plan and more of rooms that are decorated differently, right? So like the ability to be more artistic in your home, because you have a great room and in the kitchen and it's all open and it's kind of got to be the same, where like the smaller spaces allow you to do like, the Pantone color of the year in magenta.
Sure.
And so I think that evolution of the change in the way walls will go back in is going to be super
So
interesting.
just floor plans and layouts of new construction.
Smaller
sure.
spaces. Obviously, working from home has dictated some of that too. The front office isn't as conducive as maybe it once was because it's being used differently. So like, where does that office go and how is that? Maybe more of a something that's really focused on when you're building a home. Like, is it quiet? Do we have the ability to work if there's two people working from home? And so a lot of that trend change, I think, is going to be super interesting to watch it play out. And then I think, as everyone talks about, white and gray kitchens may be going away, more natural wood, more earthy tones.
Yeah,
with
we see a lot more mix, more mix of color and stain and metal and so many different products going into homes now.
Yeah. And like, what is the trend, right? Like, it's funny when people come through our parade models and they're like, is this the trend? I'm like, I don't know. It's custom. The trend is whatever you want it to be.
It was for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It was.
Yeah. I mean, green cabinetry was in this year. I don't think it's going to carry over. I don't I don't think we're getting a lot of requests for dark green, but it's fun to kind of watch that. And it really is which is why it's great to build custom, is like, it's so specific to your needs and what kind of your stylistic approach is. If it's, heaven forbid it's wallpaper, what do we call it? Wall coverings now, to go away from that. But I mean, there's a lot of trends for that. Plus like multifamily use. So are your parents moving back in because the cost of having them in senior living or somewhere else is astronomical? Yeah. Or availability.
Yeah. Availability and cost. We're seeing that on the renovation side. Again, we're seeing that. I think we've done 4 or 5 projects this year already that are, parents of the couple moving back in and creating those spaces or additions or, above a garage.
If you don't need it now, you're going to plan for it.
Correct.
Like the flex room of like, it can be an office or it could be a bedroom because I'm going to need that, or masters or primaries on the main level because I might not want that right now, but I'm going to want it in 10 years and I'm not going to leave this house. So really like thoughtful room setups and layouts. Yeah,
that trend. There's so many different trends that are going on. But Tony, back to current real estate and what you're seeing on the existing side. what should I be looking for? What creates a good value? And, you know, steer me in a way that I don't buy a house that I'm going to have to put hundreds of thousands of dollars in. What should I be looking for?
Figuring out where to start with that question is
How about
is
good
difficult.
bones?
Yeah. Do I look for the
You're
building
gonna look.
science? Do I
You're
look
gonna
for
look
windows?
for
Do I look for?
not necessarily. You're gonna look for a location first.
Yeah.
You're gonna look for what do you want there, and then does that particular location allow you to put in what level of improvements over time? Because every area is going to be driven a little bit differently that way.
Supporting the.
There is no one right answer to this question. It's like, let's find out what your criteria is and figure out, okay, well, what's the driving factor? Is it the size of the house? Is it the quality of finishes, or is it driven by location? Because whenever we're starting to work with someone initially, we go one of two roads, and it's very, very focused on a location, and then they compromise more on the house itself. Or is it, hey, the house really needs to be this or that, and it's okay if we drive a little bit.
Sure.
And so once you answer those two questions, then we can dive down or drill into all these other specifics of.
So it sounds like if you use a professional real estate expert, they would help guide you to.
They can help
that.
you uncover what your needs are.
Yeah, that's the right questions, right?
Sometimes people will have a certain vision of what they think they want, and if we drill down to like what is that basic need, below that,
It's different.
sometimes there's a nuance to it where we find a much better solution of where we would that'll last them longer or help them save money, or maybe they'll spend more money but they'll get more of what they want. So it just depends on what the driving factors are.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk markets as far as, let's put the crystal ball in the middle of the table and talk 24, 25. Kate, you talked about some trends of layouts and floor plans and things like that you talked about, but if I'm the general consumer and I think, 24, 25 is going to be a year that I do something different in my home. I'm either going to, I'm selling it, I'm remodeling it, I'm buying something new. Is 24 or 25 the right time from what do you think the market's going to look like and what do you think interest rates are going to look like? So roll the dice.
Those are big questions. I didn't know you had the crystal ball. Had I known that, and you put it on the table,
it's somewhere in the middle of the table right now. So,
I mean, we've talked about it all day here, right? Where it's like, it's hard to say when is the right time to buy. Are interest rates going to go down? I mean, there's definitely data that's pointing that way.
We got an
It
election year
probably
coming up.
needs to,
Election
right?
year coming up usually is a drop in rates. Right?
Yeah. Rates are a tough question. I think, unfortunately, in some regard, people got used to a 3.
Mm-hmm.
Is that realistic? It probably wasn't.
A record low.
A record low, but it was great, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
it was nice to have. Well, I don't think it was realistic, and that's what I talk to a lot of buyers and sellers about. Is like that. It was here for a while. People definitely took advantage of it, which they should. I bought a car during that at a 1.8% interest rate.
Sure.
I mean, things were great.
Or zero.
But the market and the economy, it's not sustainable. And I think we all can recognize that. Sitting in the 4s and 5s, the 5s I think are, wow, they've been decent. Obviously hitting 7 hasn't been ideal. I bought a house in 2008 for 6.9 and I thought I was doing great.
Yeah. You thought you really
I mean, I hit
worked
the
it down.
jackpot, right? So I mean, it's all over the place. I think there's so much more to it than an interest rate. There's so much more on a home price, the quality, what your lifestyle needs. So like, it's tough to get caught up in a rate. It does drive a lot, but it also can change fast. It can change fast, and it also can be redone. It can be refinanced. It can be the last few months, that rate has changed within days.
Yeah, it's gone up and down. It's interesting. There's a whole study out there that shows how many more buyers. Let's just talk about the state of Minnesota. There's so many more thousands of buyers in a market when interest rate, say the home price is flat, right? Interest rate goes from 7 to 5. There's hundreds of thousands of more buyers that are available in the market then, right? And that's where I'm going with the question is, all right, so we're listening, we're talking, we're in conversations every week, the three of us, and we're talking about mortgage rates, and we're talking to mortgage experts, and we're talking about those people, and they truly believe the trend is coming down, right? That we're going to go from 7 to 6 or 5, or we've heard as low in the 4s in a year and a half. So we've heard in the 5s. It'll be interesting to see how people buy based on that. Some people would be, hey, I'm not changing at all because of the location, and I'd fall in love with the community that has Cinco de Mayo and the pool party, and they do the fall pumpkin festival and whatever it might be, right? So it's going to be interesting to see as that market changes. Do you think when interest rates drop, will home prices go up because of that, right? Like, what's the teeter-totter?
Right.
And that's kind of what, we want to make sure, the general consumer has as far as good knowledge of coming forward. What does that look like moving forward? So,
Well, and historically, over the last couple of years, there hasn't been a positive result in waiting for an interest rate.
no.
So my advice would be not to wait. It would be great if it changes and then maybe refinance, but
Sure.
don't wait for the rate. It'll
Or-
be our new slogan.
Yeah, don't wait for the
Don't wait for the rate.
And so just nailing some numbers down. So saying a 1% increase in the interest rates, a 10% decline in affordability, if they're financing, right?
If, yeah,
And we've got more cash transactions than we've ever seen.
Ever had. Yeah.
I can't believe how many transactions there are that are all cash.
I can tell you that back in 16, we might have saw 10% of the transaction with cash, maybe 20%. Today, it's 70-30 cash, 80-30, 80-20.
And some
If I do the
neighborhoods
math right.
that are 90+%,
Yeah, absolutely.
depending on where it is.
Yeah. So Tony, what do you think? 24, 25? What are the years
I think
gonna look like?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I think we will hit a point where we're going to start to see rates come back down a little bit, but it's going to really depend on what's happening with inventory and like the tools our government has to influence inflation and they just don't really work very well anymore. Like we're getting into a much bigger topic, but them raising the rate or dropping the rate doesn't really influence quite as much what they're trying to do to either slow the economy or speed the economy up. I mean, sure, it does have an impact, but it just doesn't have the impact it used to. Like back in the 80s, there's a lot more influence. We didn't have the debt ceiling that we've got now. We've got a runaway train here that, who knows what it's going to look like. But I generally think that rates will come down. Affordability will get a little bit better. But I think the flip side to that is you're going to see a rise in pricing almost immediately. Yeah. There's going to be a little bit of relief, and it'll be this pent up demand because we're building up pent up demand right now.
I agree with you, Tony. I think there's so much
where
pent
we're
up
headed.
demand. I think there's the year of 2023 has created so much pent up demand, and I truly believe as that interest rate comes down, we're going to see another little housing boom going.
Yeah,
on.
well, confidence is.
I feel it within myself. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to buy a lot more rentals, but
Yeah.
I'm also sort of sitting on the sideline a little bit, not because I think pricing is going to drop or because of any other factor other than the numbers just don't work.
Yeah, it doesn't pencil out.
Like I can't buy a house for X and rent it out for X. I'm actually cash positive.
Yeah,
It doesn't work right now.
right. But along the way, you're building cash. So when the opportunity does come, you're in a good spot. So
Right.
All right, that's Roof to Curb. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted.
Thanks.